Hey everybody, it is your host Kirby Gunnarsson, aka the Ball Brawlers, aka your defending Yarsky champions, aka I am playoff bound motherfuckers. I'm here with my co-host as always, Mr. Zachariah Earlbeck. Zach, how you doing this beautiful Friday afternoon?
Uh, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I was a little disappointed. You know, I lose by a bajillion. Basically, with the way things shook out, this week is basically doesn't matter hardly for any. The Sacco playoffs are locked. So I thought to myself, okay, how can I make this a little fun? So I didn't tell you about this beforehand, but we're gonna play a little game. We're gonna play a little game here, okay?
All
So
right.
the game is to name the player who has scored the highest amount of points this season. Does that make sense? In an individual game, name the player who has scored the highest amount of points. Okay?
Yeah, so aka you're building this segment based upon players going up against you, right? Because you're salty.
Well, let's start at the top. So
Okay.
Do you want to guess or do you want me to give you the first one?
I feel like the first one, let's just go with recency bias. We'll just get started off with Tyreek Hill. Is he number one?
Tyreek Hill scored 51.4 points this week, which is the highest point total for an individual player this year. He obviously played against me this week, okay? So that was hard to watch. Okay, now you know who scored the second most points this year?
I'm going to go with Tyler Lockett.
You are close, but it was actually Dalvin.
Then Dalvin Cook was my next one. Yep.
Yeah. Dalvin Cook, back when he had his blow-up game, scored 47.6 points also against me. And then you already said number 3, that would be Tyler Lockett with 45.5 points the week before. And what do all 3 players have in common? They all played me that week.
I know 2 of the 3. I remember in the case of at least Tyreek Hill, and I know for sure Dalvin Cook, we didn't even need those points to still win that week, though, did we? We beat you by that many that we could just get a 0 in that spot, and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, once I saw that, I told the boys take the gas off. Let's save it for the next week. So you want to expand this game? Do you want to know? So if I expand the points to the first week of last year, the last week of last year, do you know who scored the most points? If I expand,
of course I do. It's Saquon Barkley in the championship game.
Trick question. In week 2, Aaron Jones scored 43.6 points against Kyler. But if you include that very last week of last year, Saquon would be number 5, who scored 41.9 points against yours truly. So of the highest point totals the last, 13 weeks of the Yarsky, I faced 4 of the top 5 high scores. Yes, this is woe is me. Everyone else can shut the fuck up. This was my segment. So I thought I'd throw a little. I know I kind of preempted you a little bit because I said I knew it had to be those top 3. And then I was like, I wonder what Saquon was last year. So, yeah, this is woe is me. But you know what? We'll get on the saddle. We'll get the boys back in the right mindset heading into the playoffs. So we'll get her figured out.
And you know what? The balance of powers always work. I remember we had a pod where teams were absolutely going off against me, and all of a sudden I bitched about it on the pod. And the next week, Sap dropped 40 points for his whole entire team. So Tyreek Hill would have beat him alone this week if it played against Sap. So who knows? Maybe you just need to bitch about it on the pod, and then the good karma comes your way.
So that's kind of what I'm hoping, is that Sap drops another 40 burger for his whole team this week against me, and I can guarantee myself a bye. So that's kind of what we're going for here, is complain a little bit and then hope Sap lays another egg.
Yep, nope, absolutely. And with Sap in mind, you know what? Let's talk briefly. We had a few matches we want to highlight from last week. We'll keep it short and sweet. Sap and Axe. 2 tight ends work. Is that pretty much it? I mean, it's kind of the who gives a shit bowl, but we had to mention it.
Yeah, I mean, the less time we can spend on this game, the better. Sap squeaks out a nice victory, even though he got 0 points from Darius Slayton and 0 points from Samaje Perine. 0.7. It's like, I don't know. Hopefully he starts Samaje Perine again this week. We'll cross our fingers. Then Axe scores a 62. Boy, does he have a tough team. Axe has to be the favorite for that Sacco at this point.
You would think so, but you never know because we do have a two-a-time Sacco down in there, so you never know how low that first playoff matchup is going to be. But it'll be tough for Sapp to get a win this week since one of his tight ends are on a bye, so that's going to hurt his chances against you ginormously.
Yeah, I do think Sapp has kind of tapped into something with this two tight end thing. But, you mentioned the two-a-time Sacco. Axe is going to get a shot at two-a-time Sacco in the first round of the playoffs. So we're one of those two teams won't be the Sacco, basically. So
it'll be for we'll kind of dive into those matchups later for sure. And I was going to talk briefly about me and your matchup, just how fun it was. I was on the drive home from Texas. All of a sudden, we're listening on the radio and just hear Tyreek Hill. And getting a 50 burger, I'm not going to say I was mad about it. And also the kicker scoring 20, that was just icing on the cake. It's like, really? What kind of kicker is getting 20? So that was a big win last week for the Ball Brawlers, getting me locked into the playoffs. So there's really not much you can say after beating like that, is there?
Yeah, I wasn't listening. We were driving back, and I wasn't listening. I couldn't find the station. And all I see is Schultes text the gif of Tyreek going like this, which obviously means he scored. So I knew that wasn't good. And then I saw Sapp say 50, holy shit, 50 in the group chat. And I go, I wonder who he's talking about. And he's fucking talking about Tyreek Hill. So at that point, I turned my phone off and I focused on the road because I knew it was over after that. So.
Well, yeah, you were just focused on talking Bryce out of minivan tickets, speeding tickets. But, hey, that's the beauty of the Chrysler Pacifica, baby.
Yeah, I can maybe mention that really quick. Bryce is not speeding on the way home, but he's driving the van. And we're in Oklahoma, and I go, there's a cop right there, don't speed. He goes, okay, I'm good. So he's in the left lane going around somebody, and then all of a sudden he looks up and he goes, holy shit, there's a cop behind me. That's that cop. So he pulls him over, and he goes, do you know why I pulled you over today? And Bryce goes, I don't think I was speeding. He goes, no, you weren't. In Oklahoma, it's a law to not spend more than, I don't remember what he said, in the left lane. So he nailed Bryce for that. Well, he basically, and then he goes, whose van is this? And I go, it's mine. He goes, do you have kids or do you just drive a van? And so we talked for the next 5 minutes about the van, and I got Bryce out of the ticket. So there's a little fun nugget for the YarskCap.
Hell yeah, there we go. All right, let's touch very quickly on the last matchup. Bilton Schultz, I know you just had a few things you want to mention. It was the last big playoff implicator.
Yeah, I mean, that one was kind of a disappointment. It ended up being a 40-point. I was going to, when we talked about it, you said the big thing could be the Cleveland defense. And boy, did they drop a negative 1 pointer. Zeke with 2.4. I don't know. I think Bill's going to be nervous going into the playoffs, and I think Schultes is going to be riding a high because, do we know if CMC is going to be back that first week?
No one knows, and that's going to be the big interesting thing. Like, teams either want to avoid Schultz that first week or want to play him based upon if Christian McCaffrey's coming back. So that's a huge wild card for his squad.
Yeah, we could talk about it later, but Schultes is going to be dangerous if he gets – because basically we said he's got to basically buy wins to get into the playoffs and then hopefully get CMC back, and he's going to be tough to beat. He's got Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, who looks – like unbelievable. And if he gets Christian McCaffrey back and Patty Mahomes, it's like, fuck, not who you want to look at across from the matchup. So.
Nope, absolutely. And so that's kind of a good recap of last week. But I want to give you a quick overview. And the thing I kind of wanted to spring on you was last week, there's been a lot of talk this week about how the Busch Light division is a superior division. Last week was a 5-0 sweep for the Natty Light division over the Busch Light division. And with that week in mind, the Natty Light division now has more wins than the Busch Light division. 3 of the top 4 scoring teams are in the Natty Light. And even if you take out, and for total points, we're also leading. But you're like, oh, okay, that's just because we have Josh. We'll take away Josh. All of a sudden, we are still have more points than the Busch Light division. Like, oh, okay, that's because our bottom two are bad. Take out the bottom two, we still have the more points in our division. So despite all the heckling that the Busch Light division gave to Natty, come the end of the year right now, it looks like the Natty division might have been the stronger of the two.
Yeah, I'm not ready to say that yet. I think what's going to end up happening is kind of the Busch Light division just kind of beat the shit out of each other, and we kind of limped to the finish line here. So I think.
How can you beat the shit out of each other if you went 0-5 last week against Natty?
That's what I'm saying.
You guys all took advantage of Josh.
All of us kind of beat up on each other, and now we're really really dejected, and we had a tough. We had a tough stretch there in the middle while we're all playing each other. So we kind of had the bumps and bruises, and we limped to the finish line. And, I think our battle-tested Busch Light division will show out in the playoffs. Hopefully I don't regret saying that, but, hopefully the better teams will show out in the playoffs. So that's all I need to say about that.
All right. Yep. I 100% agree. And so I'm just going to do a quick overview of kind of the, Sacco and then the Yarski playoffs. And then I think we're going to try and wrap this up a little bit early, hopefully. So right now, actually, the Sacco matchups are 100% set, locked and loaded, even with taking into account tiebreakers. So in the first round, and this is going to be for week 15 is when we're going to start. They're not going to play in week 14. We're going to have Jared, our two-time Sacco, versus Josh. And then we're going to, which is going to be great because we have the picture of those two together handing off the trophies. So they'll get a chance to battle each other. And then also our second matchup is going to be Sap versus Kyler, who have been calling each other out of nowhere, and they're both committed to be guests before their play. So the Sacco matchups are set for week 15. And what are your initial thoughts on those matchups? We'll obviously dive in more later, but what are your big thoughts?
Yeah, some absolute intriguing matchups, I think. You look at the first one, Axe, whose team has just been basically horrific this year, right? I mean, one win, but if you give me 2 seconds, I believe Axman's one win came against Mr. Two-a-time Sacco. So the one time that Axe gets the W, it was indeed against Two-a-time Sacco in week 6.
Ooh.
So to add even a little bit more intrigue to that is Jared, who has been on an absolute slide, coming off the 4-0 start, top of the Yarski power rankings, and then just goes on an absolute, like a slide that only Jared can slide. And, now he gets Axe, who has a terrible team. But you throw everything out the window in the past once we get into the Sacco playoffs. So it's going to become, it's going to come down to who starts the best players that week. Basically everything in the past doesn't matter. So I think that one's going to be a blast. And then Kyler and Sap, that one speaks for itself. We're going to get those two on here to talk a little bit about it themselves. But boy, is that going to be a blast. I think it'll be fun to see Kyler kind of go at Sap. Kyler's one of the quieter members, so it'll be good to get him on here and to spice him up a little bit with some Sap shit talking. So
yeah, absolutely. I know he messaged us earlier in the year, like, what do I need to do to get on? And me and you talked, and it's like, I think we have him earmarked. We're going to try and get him on for week 15. And then all of a sudden he's playing Sap, who hasn't been on and wants to get on. So I think the pieces just all fell into shape right there, which is going to be perfect.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on those Sacco playoffs?
I like the intrigue of Jared and Josh's one win is against Jared. So it's the potential. Does Josh have Jared's number, or is it the ultimate revenge game? So it's truly going to be an interesting matchup there. And like you said, Sap and Kyler speaks for itself. And it's going to be an interesting first matchup in the Sacco. And that's the beauty of it. Who's going to have – I would also like to see the pictures of where they're potentially going to place the Sacco if they lose it. But maybe we'll save that for the championship match.
Yeah, I just, there's nothing better than the Sacco play. Like, the Yarski playoffs are fun and everybody wants the belt, but god dang, is the punishment of the Sacco worse than just about everything else. So those four have to be sweating bullets right now. some more than most. Jared's on an absolute tear, and boy, is he going to hear it if he wins the third. Sacco, Axe is going to protest the season, but I just those guys have to be sweating bullets. So we've got a couple weeks before that all starts. So we can get more into it in next week's matchup. But I think we got good, intriguing matchups for the Sacco playoffs. So that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, my personal vote is I'm hoping Jared doesn't get it, because at this point, I mean, they're just numb to it being there. It's just always there. So I want it to see some fresh blood, see some fresh houses, maybe see some fresh babies along the way. So who knows what we're going to see, because that new Sacco, if it's in the house of a little baby, I mean, they can grow up idolizing what they do not want to be. So that can be the hope that we can have. And I'm officially pulling for anybody but Jared to win that Sacco. So with that in mind, I guess we want to touch really quickly on, I know this week's matchups, we don't have any big heavy hitters, so we're not going to touch on them, but just the potential placements that we could have that could be changed up. Right now, we have Ross securing the first round bye no matter what. And I believe he potentially could fall to the 2 seed, but right now he has the 1 week bye. That's all he cares about. Right now is we have the throw up between you and Pooty going for this number 2 seed and the first round bye, which is huge. Right now, you guys split the head-to-head, but you have the 1-game lead. So if you beat Sap, you're in. However, if you lose to Sap and Pooty beats me, it goes down to a tiebreaker of total points scored. And I believe the difference is very minuscule, like 10 to 20 points. So it could very well come down to this performance if you don't handle your business against Sap.
But Pooty, so you said it. If I win, I get the bye. If I lose and Pooty loses, I still get the bye. If I lose and Pooty wins, then it comes down to the tiebreaker. He has more points than I do. I think, like you said, by like a 20-point margin. Yeah.
And if you're losing to Sap, let's break the news. You're not going to be able to make up that margin. So because Sap's not scoring that many points.
Yeah, and I'm gonna segue a little bit. Well, no, I'll save it. Keep going. So that basically, if I beat Sap, I get the 2 seed, and that drops Pooty to the 3 seed. So one of us is the 2-3 seed. So
yeah, more than likely one of you is going to be the 2 or 3 seed. The one exception to that rule would be if you win and Ross loses, then I think you would actually get the 1 seed because you have the head-to-head, and Ross would be the 2. But more likely than not, it's going to be 2-3. And so the big change that could potentially happen is 4 through 6. Right now, it's currently Schultz at the 4, Built at the 5, I'm at the 6. Built has the head-to-head tiebreaker over me. What causes intrigue is if there is a 3-way tie between Schultz, Built, and myself, all the head-to-head tiebreakers, they all end up breaking even, so it comes down to total points scored. And right now, in terms of total points between us 3, I think it's all very close. Give me 2 seconds when I'll have the difference. So the total points between Built, myself, and Schultz, there's a total difference of 12 points separating the 3 teams. And so in the event that me and Built win and Schultz loses, I could climb all the way to 4, or I could stay at 6. And big head-to-head tiebreakers would be Built has it over me, but Schultz has it over Built. And so the only chance that the points scored is going to come if there's a 3-way tie, which would require Schultz to lose and me and Built to win. But other than that, it's going to come down to that. And there's a little bit of gamesmanship with it all, because there's certain parts of me that wants to play Pooty in the first round because he talks shit to me down in Texas about my team. So there's a little part of me that thought about like throwing this week, but I know that's not fair. So I'm going to make sure we keep the star lineup in, try to win that $10 weekly bonus that I won last week. And that's a nice incentive to try and keep playing.
Well, now I want you to lose. Well, if I could guarantee I beat Sap, then I want you to lose, because I would love to see you and Pooty play. That sounds like some intrigue there, some shit talking already brewing there. I'd love to see that. I'm all for the YarskCap content, but honestly, the way I look at you 3 is throw you in a blender, especially if Christian McCaffrey comes back. And I don't know, I didn't put you on the spot about who you'd want to play. You said Pooty, so you can back up some of the shit talking. But if I was ranking the 3 of you, I think Built's got to have the least. Let's assume Christian McCaffrey plays week 14. I would be least worried about Bill's team. I mean, you throw them in a blender, you're splitting hairs here. So I just the Zeke thing makes me nervous. It seems like they're the Seahawks. The Chris Carson could maybe come back and replace some of what he's losing with Zeke. But, I think I look at Schultz's team. We kind of mentioned he's got Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, DK, Pat Mahomes. Then you look at your team, Austin Eckler and, Tyreek Hill, obviously, Travis Kelce. So, I think we're splitting hairs here, but I think if you had to rank them, I think I would go Schultz, you, and then Built in that order. So I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be close matchups in that, in those first round of the playoffs. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and you guys are splitting hairs. So it'll be nice to know who's playing who after this week.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the one I would tend to agree with you. I like Bill's team the less. The one thing he does have in favor of Week 14, he's got Russell Wilson and Chris Carson playing the Jets. And so all of a sudden, they're scoring a cornucopia of points. The question is, how many are they going to score before they turn off the brakes? So that'll be a lot of intrigue that we're going on to the first round of the playoffs. But like you said, nothing big, major items to talk about for this upcoming week's matchup except for shuffling around the deck. But we got to know all the big players and all the big games.
Yep. I think you kind of nailed it. There's not a lot, there's not a lot of movement. You guys are really tight, and, it's going to be kind of a crapshoot. So it'll be fun to know who plays who after this week. So I suppose the last thing I've got, and that we need to make sure that we call SAP out on, is we need to make sure that SAP Vegas betting lines are available for next week's playoff matches. Talk about some excellent YarskCap content here. If we can go over some betting lines, which ones we like, which ones we don't like. So this is a public call out, SAP. Get your people on these lines, on the over-unders. Let's figure it out, because we need that for next week.
And the one thing is, I can understand during a playoff week of him not doing it, but next week he has nothing to do except for try and prepare for Week 15. So after he does his waiver claims, he has nothing to do on Friday, Saturday. So he needs to be solely focused on getting these betting lines straight, at least for the first round matchups. Then he can worry about demolishing Kyler. So this is our public service announcement to SAP. We need these lines. Your house is going to look like shit after how many hours of work anyways, but we are proud of the fixer-upper you're doing, but spend a little time working on the YarskCap.
Yeah, and we can even, we publicly shame him until he gets those lines in, and then he can come on the podcast next week and defend them while we pick our favorites and stuff. So I think without those lines next week, we're going to SAP on the chopping block. He might be out of Yarsky if he doesn't get us those betting lines.
Now that's a harsh reality right there. Zach's sitting here calling for people to get cut from the league. I like it. Well, I think that's kind of all the main items that we wanted to touch on. Next week, I guess we didn't discuss any power rankings, but we don't necessarily need to do a deep dive into that. We wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. Next week, we can do a playoff preview of the matchups and potential. I think we got to do our projections for the final playoffs of both the Yarsky and the Sacco and kind of go from there. What do you think?
You're saying you want to do them right now, or do you want to do them next week?
No, we can do that next week if you want to.
Yeah, let's do that, because then we'll know who's, kind of where everybody's slotted in. That'll make things a little clearer. So. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I think that just about does it for us here. It is now 4:00 on Friday. I'm just finishing my first Natty Light, and I got a cold one in the fridge waiting for me. So with that in mind, Zach, you got any last words for everybody before we finish off the regular season?
You know what? I would say we are a podcast for the people. People, specifically Axemen, were complaining that the last couple were too long because we had plenty to talk about. Well, you know what? Here you go, Axe. This one's for you, big guy. Nice, short and sweet. So hopefully next week we come on and it's going to be a fire podcast. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad we still got together. It's still another week to talk fantasy football and talk to Yarsky. So I'm glad we did it. But next week I'm looking forward to.
Yep. Like we said in the beginning, kind of a light week on content, but you know what? We're here for the people. We keep the momentum going. We're going to have one for each round of the playoffs, and then we'll probably have to do end of the season rewards. So with that in mind, happy fantasy football, everyone. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Peace.